You know what sound that is, folks. You betcha. That's another Noon Whistle. I'm Chris Trottier.
And I'm John Anzalone, and we're here today with District Administrator Jason Tadlock, Business Manager Bill Trewyn, and School Board President Julia Ingersoll. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, let's kind of start out from the beginning a little bit, and maybe Julia, you could come and tell us kind of how we got to this point. I know we're going to talk referendum today and try to give some information, but there was a lot of community involvement in this whole thing, assisting the district, right?
Absolutely. I've been serving on the school board. I'm in the middle of my 7th year on the board. I am currently the longest tenured board member serving, and so I've had a chance to look at the school board budget every single year for the last 7 years. And, you know, I've always been proud of the fact that we've been able to operate in the black while others around us in other school districts have not. And, you know, there's been years where we were projecting maybe a $700,000 to $1 million shortfall, but, you know, through creative methods used during the year to cut some costs in different areas, we've always been able to end the school year in the black. And that's been something that I've really been proud of. A couple of years ago, when we started looking at this, at the projecting out where we were going to be based on what the state was doing for funding, or maybe better said, not doing for school funding, is we started to see that we were, even though we brought in over 800 students open enrolled to Elkhorn and done some very creative things through 2 charter schools to increase our revenue. There was going to be starting to be a fiscal cliff where we were going to start falling off and not be able to keep up.
So Julia, before I forget, because my memory is good, but it's very short.
Yeah.
You talked about those shortfalls, and I guess the question I have for everybody is, so we face these shortfalls every year. How did we deal with that? How did we get to, hey, we're balancing the budget? What are there things that went into that? Are there adjustments? Where did that go?
Yeah, I think they were different things that were used every year. Some of it was attrition. Bill, you can probably speak to that better than I can. But I think there were different things every time we were faced with that. There were different things that we were able to do to get ourselves in that position, right?
Yeah, and we have a list of it and I have a Loom video that's on our district website related to the referendum, but I'll just give you a 1-year example going back to 2014-15, which was, I believe, either my first year in the school district. So it's leading into that 14-15 school year. We eliminated high school and middle school overloads, which is when teachers were teaching more than their allotted classes. That was an $80,000 savings. We eliminated the high school in-school suspension position. That was a $40,000 savings. We reorganized the middle school, resulting in the eventual net of 6 fewer positions. That came out to about a $600,000 savings. High school teachers shifted from teaching 5 of 8 class periods to 4 of 5 periods. That means they went from a 63% teaching load to an 80% teaching load. That was a substantial instructional efficiency savings. At the time, we estimated to be about a $1.2 million equivalency. And then we eliminated supervised study halls, allowing for that future attrition over there at that high school. And on top of that, again, each year we've been able to grow our open enrollment. That year, our open enrollment numbers increased by $400,000 in gross revenue. So that's just an example of 1 year. You can go to the website and get the historical record for steps that we've taken each and every year, going back to 2014, 15.
Super impressive, though, that you got, like, you've provided all these things in these programs and excelled and in the top 10% and while getting leaner.
Yeah, I think one of the other key components that I think we've institutionalized probably now over the years is we do a lot of financial planning. We do a 3, we do a 5-year forecast. And part of my role, I think, is to provide that information to our leadership, our board, so that we have ample time really to plan and make good decisions that minimizes the impact really for our students and our parents. Right. And I think we've been successful with that. It's just now it's becoming more and more difficult. And I think, when we went to referendum in 23, the board was well aware of that several years prior that this fiscal cliff was coming. And our budget process really starts almost a year and a half before the next fiscal year and flows, during that time period. And there's a number of not only board meetings, but workshops where there's a lot of discussion that goes on in the annual budget process. And probably most people aren't even aware of that, but it's a huge commitment of our school board.
Bill, real quick, and I know you mentioned this yesterday, and obviously you talk about, we've had the ad hoc committee, we were planning, leadership teams involved. So it's a real shared commitment. Let's talk about, share with the viewers who may not know, like, what teachers, what sort of responsibility have they felt over the last, let's just say, X amount of years in us recapturing dollars and cents and getting a balanced budget? So what burden have they felt?
Well, I know I can answer this question from a conversation that I had very recently with one of our teachers, and she was sharing with me that she puts in at least $1,000 of her own money every school year, and that's at minimum. She's like, sometimes it's been as much as $2,000 in a school year, just to provide supplies and other things that she wants to provide for her classrooms. And that's her personal choice. But I think it shows, and she's like, I know that I'm not alone. She's like, I can guarantee that just about every single teacher is investing dollars into their own classrooms. So I think that's one way that it's
Bill, haven't we
impacting
made
them.
some other, yeah. Bill, haven't we made some other decisions on the insurance side too that have helped us recapture some dollars by shifting some costs around?
Yeah, well, I think everyone's aware about 75% of our budget is personnel. And that becomes the area that we need to look at. And particularly in the benefit side, health insurance is always, one of the largest line items in our budget. And probably for the last at least 10 or 12 years, we've been making significant changes in our health plan for our employees. And we've either bid that insurance program out just about every single year. We've had a change in either carriers or copays or deductibles. And that certainly has affected our staff. And the amount that they have to pay out of their paycheck in addition to those benefit changes certainly has affected all of our employees.
I have a question. Could you explain to me, so I have the fact sheet here and I have the little chart with the tax impact. Could you give a quick elevator speech on how that works and how those get totaled up? And at the end of those 4 years, what happens?
Yeah, I guess maybe the best description I would give is the approach is a phase-in or a ladder. So the increase you see on that chart is over a 4-year period. So I believe on a $300,000 home, and it eventually gets to a dollar figure of $300 that 4th year. and then it stays at that $300. It does not continue to increase. It's a 4-year phase in and remains then at that level. One of the things that we did when we put those projections together is we were very conservative in terms of how state aids may change over that time period, and property values as well. Although we've seen large market growth in our property values, we realize that's market growth, and in reality what you need is new tax base each year, and that's the only thing that we factored into those projections.
Okay, that makes sense. I think there's some confusion sometimes with assuming that there's some increase that continues to roll forever and ever.
So Jason, I'll put you on the spot here. Quick question. Approximately how many districts across the state are seeking operational referendums? Do you or Bill have that number?
Well over 80% have sought operational referendums. I believe this year alone, the number is close to 150, or no, was it 180, Bill, and over 200 questions in total?
I believe it's 150 school districts.
Correct. And, which is, and in large part, that's just because many of them have already gone within the last 3 years, if you go back last year and the year before that. So it's a very large percentage, and that's just the system that we're in now, that to close the holes in the funding formula as it relates to inflation, school districts need to turn to their local community, and the community has local control, local voice, which that's not a bad thing. It does still, if the referendum is successful and the revenue limit increases, the state still provides the state aid to offset that portion of the revenue limit, and we're aided at about 45% right now. So it's not completely all on the local community. The state does provide aid and help offset that.
So Jason, I know that, so obviously we have local school districts that have gone to operational referendum. Obviously it's common across the state. So this isn't just an Elkhorn issue. This is a state funding. I think, Julia, you said in the beginning what the state hasn't done versus what they have done. Jason, talk a little bit. I know the ad hoc committee that was comprised of numerous stakeholders. What were some of their recommendations if we do get to a point where the referendum doesn't pass, and then maybe connect that to some local districts that haven't passed and what you've seen on their impact too?
Yeah, I think we have a whole list or menu, and as it relates to what are measures that can or that we should take, and input was given in regards to whether they thought they were good ideas or not. The reality is, with this plan, we're still cutting an additional 1.75 million between the 2 years, and so we've had to implement some of those, such as reduced bus services. We eliminated 3 bus routes last year using attrition of staff and positions, which, as you reduce teaching positions, it has a inverse effect where it increases class size, no matter how you slice it and look at it. We would also use that attrition as it relates to administrative positions, all positions across the board, which puts greater stress or strain or reduced services that can be provided. Close the school and shift students. That's what we do, as we're not a declining enrollment district, but we have seen other schools do, or other districts do that, such as Delavan when they closed Wildman and shifted the students to Darien and Turtle Creek and used center school models, or Burlington that we saw just next door where they closed an elementary school. And so shifting to a center school model may very well be something that we need to do, where you have grade bands, like, for example, Westside might be kindergarten and first grade, Jackson second and third, and Tibbetts fourth and fifth, or some other scenario where you consolidate your staffing and get more efficient along those lines. So there's we also discuss things such as going to a 4-day school week, shortening the school year. We shaved a week off for up to 2 weeks. So just a lot of different factors that, can you get there, and could we get there? yes, but the district would look significantly different. And that's why we need to go to referendum so that the community can have a say and a voice. And do you want those type of measures to be taken, or would you like to increase the revenue limits so that we can maintain and protect what we currently have?
Jason, how does, did you see the question? And I think you answered it. That was asked about how is this, if the referendum doesn't pass, how is this going to affect students, or what impact will it have on our children?
Yeah, I think I spoke to that quite a bit, but I would share it, and you don't have to go far. I mean, and it's certainly not to pick on these districts. I feel for Burlington and other areas, but when you've seen districts have to reduce staff by 30 to 40 staff and or close schools, and Chris, I know you're a member of that community, but the reports I've heard is, you're looking at class sizes around 30 at the elementary schools, upwards of 40 depending on the class at the high school level. In some cases, team teaching classes, but having 60 kids in a section at the same time. The loss of that community type school, pay freezes, which then make it difficult to retain staff and keep them there, which when you have that turnover, you lose that experience and that training, and there's a lot of loss of productivity. It takes us for a new teacher about 5 years before I feel like they're really hitting their stride and they're hitting the groove. And if you can't have a system and a structure in place where you can keep and retain teachers beyond that level, you're just going to lose quality instruction and that stability for your students.
Well, and Jason, I can speak to, being a resident in that community is that they cut 40 plus teachers. As a result of that, they've lost quality talent to other districts. Most recently, their largest co-curricular group is FFA. They could not find a coordinator and supervisor. There were experienced teachers, rock star teachers who've been there for 40 years, who retired because they had the years of service but didn't want to, and they did that to save inexperienced teachers or new teachers' jobs. And then they've also, and here's kind of a little new interesting point, they also added significant costs to building use and rental fees at their facility to recapture some of the loss of revenue. So it's unfortunately had a trickle-down effect and impacted programs, kids, and classrooms. And I know they also combined their middle school to be a 5 through 8, grades 5 through 8.
Yeah, and I heard from one instructor that worked there that, there was a lot of concern over the cost or what that tax impact would be for them, but there was a lack of forethought in that, well, now I'm going to have to pay for daycare for 2 more weeks, or, the real fiscal impact that it has on families that do have younger children within the school district, and how that cost has been much greater than any tax impact that would have come from the referendum.
So I guess, John, I was going to ask, John, Bill, Julia, Jason, what are some, as we kind of wind down here, what are some questions that you guys are hearing that you'd like to use the #1 podcast in Walworth County as a platform to give your answer?
I would just finalize by sharing a quick anecdote, and I'll try to keep it quick. But a couple of referendums ago, I was meeting with a property owner in Elkhorn and took her on a tour reviewing the plans of the district. And she has lots of rental properties and apartments, and had shared her concern about the tax impact and what that would do for her. And I just asked, how many vacant apartments do you have right now? What's your occupancy rate? And she said, oh, it's 100%. I said, you don't have a single one that's open? Oh, no. And I have a waiting list. As soon as, an apartment comes open, I have the next person in. And I said, why do they come here? Why do you think it's so great? Because the schools are great. People come here, they want to be here, they want to be a part of the community because of those schools. The referendum, and I know it's a big ask, and we humbly are submitting it after we've done what we feel is everything in our power to get to this point. And we do need the help of the community to maintain and protect where we're at. But it's also an investment in yourself and your own property and maintaining your own property values and what you do have. I've seen significant increase in my property just since I've moved to Elkhorn, and that value and where it's at, and having strong schools and good schools and being in a desirable place where people want to move to and live protects that investment and protects that resource that we have. And so I do believe it is a valuable investment for each and every community member, whether you have kids in school or not. It keeps people wanting to come to the community. It keeps them wanting to be a part of it, and it does protect our assets that we have.
So one last question for the group. The referendum model, do you think that it's going to become the have and have nots of communities and schools our size, that those communities that support their schools and their community will be the haves, and those that don't will be the excuse me, the have nots, and people will just go to other places, that whether that's staff or students?
I think we've already seen that happen. There, like I said earlier, we've got over 800 students that are open enrolled to Elkhorn. There's a reason for that. It's because we're the best in the area. We offer the most opportunities, and there's a significant number of those students that come from one school district, and it happens to be a nearby school district that had a referendum that did not pass a number of years ago. And it had a direct impact on that community in a significant way. And it has a direct impact on their property values. As a local business owner and a custom home builder, I can tell you that as we look at property values when our customers are buying property, that community is not one that they're wanting to build homes in. So,
Bill, what have you kind of, as I think I'm quoting you and saying you've been a business manager since the Reagan administration. I think that's what you've said.
You shouldn't have quoted me, Chris.
I apologize.
I wasn't going to say that.
Well, I mean, you started when you were 14, so that's
right.
So what have you
finish it?
Yeah, when you look at where we're at, to John's question about the power, we're being told by our legislature that this is the solution to the state's allocation to schools. What are talk a little bit through your lens on what you've seen over time.
Well, I think the state also has a lot of other challenges they need to address too. So I don't want to pin it all on the state, but at the same time, I think budgets and resources always come down to priorities, and that's really the question at heart. I think there are some changes in terms of how schools are funded. I go back to the 2019 Blue Ribbon Commission that came up with some really sound recommendation, and it was cross-representative, Republicans, Democrats, that unfortunately nothing has happened with that. And I think that's one mechanism. I think the have and have-nots is certainly what seems to be going on as I talk to my colleagues around the state. That certainly seems to be becoming more extreme. And I think what might happen is you eventually hit a tipping point. And I think we'd all like to avoid that. So I do believe certainly the state has a role here in how do we provide really an adequate or outstanding education to all children in the state. And I do believe the system that exists today has been changed so much, in all good intentions probably, but it doesn't really exist the way it was at one time. And I think it probably does deserve some time as a state to really pull over and review and look at what we want to do. What do we want to do in special education? What do we want for a base education financially to look like for all our students? Those are some really good questions that I'd like to see our leaders in the state level to start addressing.
All right, John, what do you think? Are we getting close to that time?
I think we're getting close to that time. And I after listening to everybody, it just kind of leaves me with, we all come from education. and we want that to be good education, right? Like I want the doctor that got a good education, not a bad education, if he's operating on me. And we all want, we all come from education. And I think that's how important education is. And I think I've said this before, Chris, that if we were all to think of 3 people who were impactful in our lives, I bet one of those 3 was a teacher. And that's how important education is.
100%.
Yep. All right. Well, Bill, Julia, thanks for being on here. Jason, and we appreciate your time. Any parting words, anything you guys want to add before we sign off here and get everybody back to work?
No.
Good.
Thank you for everybody who's spent the time to watch and listen.
Yep.
And we are always here and more than happy to answer any questions, take any phone calls.
Yeah.
And that's it. Have a great
All
day.
right.
Thank you very much for your time.
John, on that note, I think it's about that time, wouldn't you say?
Let's do it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being on here.